Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome to this edition of the Tuesday Telecast, where we're going to talk about attractive minds. And what is an attractive mind? Is it something that's pretty? Is it something that sees pretty things? Is it something that attracts things to itself that it wishes to have? And that is all correct. So before I look right now, it looks like I've got people in the back. So let's bring them into the house and stop hearing me babbling. Hello and welcome to the Joyful Path and the Tuesday Telecast. And here we are with our guests. We are going to talk about attractive mind. What is it? Is it very comely to look at? Is it very is it something that attracts things to it? It maybe is both. Let's see. So what I want to do is talk to the guests that are here in the room and let them introduce themselves and say a little bit about why they're here, because they're each going to have a really interesting perspective on this. So I'm going to start with Matt. Matt, tell us about you and what you do and why you're here.
Hi, I'm Matt Allen, founder of Kudos and Democry, amongst other things. I am here because Lydia has a very attractive mind, and I like to understand what goes on in it and outside of it. My mind is not so attractive, and it's hidden behind this facade that keeps it even less attractive. But in many ways, quite interesting because the things that I sort of dream up, and incidentally, I don't dream. Myself and a friend were having a conversation about that the other day, about how I don't dream, and I also have never read a book, so I don't really understand the context of people read a book and they see the pictures in their mind. That doesn't really calculate in my mind. I suppose that's kind of interesting, but maybe not attractive mind. I don't know. Anyway, that's me. Hi.
Thank you, Matt. Always the comedian. And Lark, welcome.
Hello. Thank you, thank you, thank you. An honor to be here. So I am Lark Ambris. I am a mental fitness trainer, a mindset coach, and an accountability buddy. And an attractive mind. Why am I here today? I guess this topic resonated with me because I do a lot of mental fitness. And so I think about mind mastery and what a struggle that is, especially these days when attention spans are so short, when there's so much stress and minds just go in every which direction and we feel so unfocused and overwhelmed. So I am happy to just join this conversation and hear what other people's thoughts are about attractive mind, what that is, how do we get it, what can it look like. So that's me.
Perfect. And Michaela, tell us.
There. Thank you for inviting me today. For me, an attractive mind is an open mind. It belongs to a person who can consider options other than the ones they're already holding. They can look at other views and maybe, handle the fact that maybe they changed their mind. Ooh, I love to come across somebody who can change their mind. I find that to be a very attractive mind because it's alive. It still has choices, and you can do things with that. An unattractive mind to me is one that is bogged down in sort of groupthink or, a particular pattern that doesn't belong to it, but the person has adopted it because it's easier. So let's go with the popular opinion. We'll go with the people who shout the loudest. that kind of thing to me is a deeply unattractive mind. So exploring what that looks like for each of us, I think is going to be very interesting, because that's my definition, but what's yours?
Thank you, Michaela. So I am Lydia Lowery Busler, and I am the host of this show. And if you've ever been here before, you already know that. But what do I think about an attractive mind? I think that everybody in this room has done something that is not what people saw them doing. Maybe not is what they themselves saw themselves doing. So creating a lot of things for other people and for themselves that didn't exist before. And that's something which I want to explore, because we have the ability to change things and attract them to ourselves. In theory, right? So let's talk about what evidence have you seen of this, or what do you know? What's the attraction that happens? Some people say this is baloney, and maybe they are stuck. But I have the thought that they still can change. They still can open their minds and do something different than what they see in front of them, which is their belief. So
I'd like to jump in,
yeah,
if I may.
please
So
do.
one of the things that I refer to, I have a podcast and I refer to this thing often in my podcast. It's the reticular activating system of the brain. Now, hang on a minute, because I'm not going to go hog wild with the science, but the point to the reticular activating system is it gives you more of what you focus on. So if you've just bought a red car and you go out for a drive in your lovely red car, you are going to see so many red cars, it's going to look like there's a conspiracy going on. You know, like, where did all these red cars come from? But the reticular activating system says, oh, hey, you like red cars? Here, let me give you more of those. So the practical application is, if you're looking for things to confirm that you're having a terrible day, or that all these things are awful, then that part of your brain is going to say, oh, that's what you want? Okay, here, have more. And it gives you more. It doesn't judge. It doesn't decide for you. It just gives you what you're focusing on. So if you choose positive things to focus on, things that make you happier, things that you like to see, things that you like to bring into your world, the reticular activating system is going to help you to do that. And conversely, if you want to wallow in it and you want to find all the negative stuff, the reticular activating system will give you that too. So there's your fundamental choice right there. And I just love that part of neuroscience, because it's something you can test for yourself. I mean, everybody can go test that today.
I love that too. Yeah, go on.
Yeah, I was actually listening to Joe Dispenza this morning, and I think he has done an excellent job in just popularizing these concepts, and as you were speaking, what leapt to mind is him saying, where attention goes, energy flows, beautifully encapsulated in like 2 sentences. It's so true. What we focus on, that's what's going to happen. And he actually cited the example of when we're training new pilots, for example. You don't say, don't hit the mountain. You say, focus on the course, right? You focus on where you want to go, because that's where the energy and the attention and everything is going to happen. That's where the alignment's gonna happen. So yeah, love those thoughts.
Fabulous segue. We have also people who are sure that they're just so used to always getting a parking spot. And because they're so used to getting that parking spot, they get the parking spot every time, because they can see all the parking spots are there. It's not that people naturally and suddenly are thrown out of restaurants and hospital beds and in order to vacate a parking spot for them. It's that they know where to, their mind actually brings them toward where it is that the parking spot is, because it knows that it's going to get a parking spot. It's the belief, it's the mindset. It knows what it wants. We have a fabulous collaboration with our minds. No matter what, our mind will give us exactly what we want. So
Um, sorry. So a couple of things. We're saying about the fact that we're going to get what we're looking for, or to some extent, the more that we look for a certain thing, that would be what we're going to attract to ourselves, or the energy that's provided from whatever it is that we're putting in. But there are exterior factors that sometimes put the opposite, maybe the opposite, maybe some affirmation of what it is that we're looking for. It tends to be the opposite of what I'm looking for, that these things provide us with, particularly social media and stuff like that. People with their own agendas, and when I say people, I mean the people at the top of these things, the powerful people who put ideas into people's heads and tell them what the norm is to think. Sometimes people get offset from what it is that they're looking for, and maybe they're particularly interested in a red car, for example, but YouTube just gives them blue cars, and eventually they're just giving them just sort of go, yeah, blue cars, I like blue cars, yeah, it's all I think about, blue cars. Forget about the red ones, don't really care about them anymore, blue cars. Or the other thing is, very interestingly, that you can believe what you want to believe and make changes in your life and other people's lives through belief, true belief, and true desire for something that you believe in. And that for me is an interesting balancing act for some people. I think potentially the people in this room are a lot more decisive about what they are interested in and hone in on those things, and probably, I don't know, for instance, don't watch the general news, because that's possibly misleading to those people. Yeah, I'm aware, Michaela, that you've said that exact phrase in one of our previous roundtables. I think it's quite interesting that some people can be more manipulated by the system or by exterior factors, and the more beautiful mind possibly is the one that is more able to freely think and acknowledge what it requires and what other people require and what's interesting for people, and try and provide that and try and believe in that and hope for that and make that happen. That's what I think is beautiful.
I think, to follow on from that, Matt, a part of this is, what do you think is attainable for you? Not you personally, but an individual. What do you think is attainable? And if you set your bar low, okay, but if you set your bar low, that's what you're going to attain. If you set your bar on miracle, then you can attain that. It's you get nothing without belief. Absolutely, no question. If you don't believe you can, then you're right. And that was Henry Ford. Love him or hate him, he wasn't wrong. So that's belief is a huge part. You have to believe that you can do that thing, that you can reach that thing, and however far that goes, wherever the limitations put the blocks on, that's how far a person gets. So, and choices, right? Like watching the news is a choice. I don't think I could watch it now. I haven't watched it since 2016, and I have absolutely no intention of starting now. It's just, ooh, no, thank you. There's a lot of people yelling their own opinions that they've been paid to sprout. None of it's news. The news doesn't exist now how it once was. And I'm not sure it was perfect then, but it sure as heck isn't now.
I'd love to also comment, Matt, on one element of what you said, and that's about the influence of external forces. And I wanted to just highlight that at some point you did get in line with what I'm thinking is truly true. And that is ultimately, though, you decide, you make the choice. So you do have external stimuli, and that may guide to influence you in one direction, blue car or red. However, ultimately, it's the state of your mind that determines ultimately where you go. And so if your heart is really passionately set on a red car, you will see and appreciate all of the blue cars, and maybe you will wait a little longer. Maybe that red car is a little bit further out of reach because it's so aligned with what you ultimately fundamentally want to bring into your being and world and life. You will get that red car. It may take a little longer than the more easily accessible blue car. But yeah, I just wanted to highlight that, jump in there.
I love this conversation because something that, Matt, you brought in was the idea of consequence, and the fact that when we believe something and there aren't any external influences, there aren't any consequences from the outside, then there it is, we get that. But there's also what happens when we are caught in the consequence of something else. I believe strongly in consequences, and that we are very, very much, that is very much what our worldview is in general. But sometimes those consequences aren't really something that we did, such as floods, bombs. You know, we may get caught in something, or we may grow up in a household that has a lot of influence of news. And so what is it that breaks us free of that? Is there, to me, I say, sometimes we just decide that whatever is going on is not acceptable. And that's what gives us that new vision, because it's not acceptable to be where we're bombed. It's not acceptable to be where we're scared. It's not acceptable to be injured. It's not acceptable to be starving. And we give ourselves a new vision and we make that happen. But what say you? Anyone, hop in.
No, I agree. A lot of it has to do with how do you respond to what's going on and what ultimately it is you want for yourself, for example. So in the scenario that you just painted, I mean, I'm in a region of the world right now, it's considered a third world country. There are people who look around and just say, not me, this is not the life I want. I'm looking at America, I'm looking at Canada, I'm looking at the UK, because I want different from what I'm seeing and it's not accessible here. And so I need to tap into some other resources, financial, emotional, everything else, to get myself from here to there. I have no clue where I'm going to find the money for the plane ticket, where I'm going to live. I have no idea what I'm going to do, but I know what I'm seeing right now is not for me. So yes, sometimes I think, we kind of hit Matt's jumping in, right? Yep, sure thing, Matt. But yeah, I mean, I just wanted to speak to that point that show again, I think we are speaking about that whole, you have to believe that what you want, you have to be clear first of all on what you want. If you're not clear on where you're going, you're not getting anywhere. So that's the first thing. But when you truly feel it and believe in it, as someone was saying earlier, you have to believe too that it is possible, not just possible, but possible for you. Then fuel the action, but that mindset is key. Matt, I know you wanted to jump in.
Okay. So interesting fact is that the third world countries are potentially also the countries that people believe are not third world countries. I live in the UK. I know people all over the world, and many of those countries are facing people who are dying and in destitution because they can't afford to do the basics of life in those countries, like Europe, England, America. Some of the things that I talk about and some of my posts that are coming up for this Kudos Christmas Advent calendar thing that we're doing from Kudos at the moment, they're based around poverty and discrimination and wars and things like this, and the fact that a lot of the world perceives some of the rest of the world as being different to where they are, when really we're all in the same boat. Sure, the boat might be in a slightly different or deeper pond or river or sea, but really we're all in the same boat. And that, for me, is the important thing about looking at that situation, is that I can see you want to jump in as well. It's not, oh, and you, it's not bad for a partially sighted guy, really. I can see you all. That's quite good. But the way that I see that is that we all need change. And ultimately, that change is coming quite soon, because the world is moving towards that position of change, and potentially people are looking at things and thinking, I really want a red car, but all that I see is blue cars. And they look at the other people and they see what they're told and they think, oh, they've got a red car. All that I want is a red car. I'd like to get their red car. When really they haven't got a red car. They've got a blue car just the same as everybody else. And it's pretty rubbish. But everybody's fed up of driving around in blue cars or looking at blue cars or whatever you want to say. In fact, what they want is red cars, and we need to figure out a way to make that happen, rather than we continue driving the blue cars until we all smash into smithereens because we've all crashed each other's blue cars because we all think that everybody else is driving a red car, when people aren't. They're driving blue cars, they're looking at blue cars because that's all that they can see. Except it's not all that they can see, because everybody can see red cars and they want to drive a red car and they want to be in the red car and they want to own a red car and look at a red car, and they're getting fed up of seeing the blue ones. And eventually they're going to want to believe and make change happen to get in red car. So as you nominated me, back to you.
Okay, mine is going to be short because I know I've had the stage for a little bit before, but it was just this analogy of us all being in the same ocean. Yeah, I really strongly disagree with that. I think we're not all on the same ship. We have some of us are in yachts and some of us are in dinghies, and some of us are in little 2 horsepowers, and some of us have double 300 horsepower. So yeah, I just really wanted to jump in and just share that. But I yield the mic. I concede the floor. Others have burning things to say and contribute also.
I have so many things going on that I want to say. I'll just pick a few. The first thing that leaps to mind is I lived in Singapore for 4 years, and Singapore is officially a third world country, and they love being designated as a third world country. It's brilliant because they get all kinds of economic benefit from that. And I've lived in 8 countries and I've traveled to a lot more than I can possibly count. I've been moving since I was 6 months old. And I got to tell you, Singapore is the most advanced place I've ever lived. Now, I'm in the US and New Mexico is next to me. There's a kindergarten not too far away that has a dirt floor. And this is New Mexico. You know, where our local medical services here, and I'm rural, right? Fairly rural. Our local medical services, our doctor is retiring in the beginning of January. And a number of the doctors have left recently. And what we're left with is nurse practitioners. Now, nurse practitioners have skills, but they're cheaper than doctors. So we're getting to a point where you can't get medical tests without going to the emergency, because that's the only place where they'll do them. You know, so this is the concept of third world, I think, is outdated and needs to be redefined. But I absolutely agree. We're all on the same ocean, yes, but man, the vessels look different. Some of those suckers are leaking. You know, some of those are leaking, and we just got to get bailing. And you know, and you can have that same experience at different times in your life. You know, I've been homeless at one point. I was homeless for a year, That was an interesting experience, I can tell you. And then, you know, I've had tea with the king in Ladakh. So, you know, there's different experiences, and you run the whole gamut. And that's what's possible is only limited by your imagination, honestly. I mean, I have traveled with a backpack and an air ticket and no money, and just trusted that when I get there, it'll figure itself out. And it did. Yay. But you know, sometimes that looks different. And to what Lydia was saying about consequences, okay, now the behavior analyst in me has to come forward and say consequences are the immediate ending to something you've done. So it's what happens if you're walking along the street, reading your Kindle or something, and you walk into a lamppost. The consequence of not paying attention was that you walked into a lamppost and it hurt. So consequences are always tied to your actions, definitely. It's that, so the whole thing with floods and what have you, I can't quite relate that to consequences of an individual, but consequences of what people are doing globally. Yeah, global warming, you know, global alteration. Some places are getting colder, some are getting warmer, some are getting more desert. That is a thing. So that is a broader consequence. And
Absolutely.
that's some of what was going on in my head while you were all talking. I'm like,
We do have, we always have a consequence to every one of our reactions and our actions. Anything that has that word action in it, there's a consequence. But we can possibly, there's certainly, if we weren't born, we wouldn't have a consequence of having the things around us that happen, either being thrown in a trash bin or being held and coddled. We would not experience that, and we would not have any consequences if we weren't born. However, did we create those consequences otherwise? No. Do we have influence over them? Babies are actually fabulous at figuring out how to get what they want with a very, very small amount of tools. Babies are very wise. We have this ability to, when you know exactly what you want, because babies have focus. Babies they want to be sheltered, they want to be loved, they want to be fed, they want to have whatever this pain is that's happening go away. But when they actually want to, so they might cry, you know, that might be what they do because it gets results. They may smile because it also gets results. We all love a smiling baby, and so many of us will just hop to a crying baby. Definitely know what they're doing because it works. However, do they cry? Do they do any of this complaining when they're trying to walk? No, because they're super focused on trying to walk. And that's not something that they're really looking for help on. Usually, very often, a baby might cry for a moment, a toddler trying to walk, but not for very long. They get right back up and keep going. Why? Because they see everybody walking. And that is what they're going to do. Consequence is an interesting thing because it's not, it affects everybody, whether we think it or not. And a lot of people don't want to be responsible, but you know, there's the consequences anyway. So I think it's the greatest thing to have responsibility toward yourself, because you certainly can't be responsible for anything else, but you can influence it. The boat, the dinghy,
Maybe.
the yacht, the all these things on the ocean, that is maybe the same. I heard so much of the same thing coming out of everyone, even though it seemed like, you know, qualifiers and quantifiers, because what we have is the United States, where people aren't thinking about anybody suffering. And that's the thing that is different when we think about that versus Singapore, and we don't know anything about it, and we think, oh, these people are less advanced, when really this very new country is very much not less advanced. Whatever we're stuck in, whatever rhetoric we have going on in our heads, that's what we see, and it will fool us. But we can fool ourselves into doing other things. And I think everyone can speak about that. Matt, I was going to say, you have an interesting way of not just fooling yourself into other things, quote unquote, but in fooling other people into thinking that, gee, maybe we can create some change. So yeah, please do tell us what's going on in your mind.
I'm not sure that you've got time on the show for all of that, but interestingly, you point out about what people in the US, potentially some of them, many of them, I don't know, I don't live in the US, and potentially I'm knowing only what I'm provided as information about what I see and feel and experience of people in the US. But going back to the interestingly, we were all told, I was told, I was of the understanding that the USSR, when I was small, and I'm nearly 50, so like reasonable chunk of time. Now, when I was little, my understanding was that, yeah, my life wasn't particularly great. My parents didn't work very much. My dad was unemployed for like 4 years on the road. So we literally survived then off of handouts from other people in terms of food. In fact, we spent a month just eating broad beans pretty much, because that was a bag of broad beans that we were given from the local farmer. But that's by the by. We grew up not having the best life. That's maybe relative to what other people experience as the best life. But we were always of the understanding that the people in Russia, they were surviving by eating bits of cardboard, or they had like one room that they all lived in, or they like lived in a very grey world where there was no colourful clothes, or no access to TV, or everything was just covered in mud, and you wouldn't want to live there. They don't even have colour TV or planes or anything to go on holiday, right? But my sort of ex-wife, we're in the middle of sorting that out. She's from Russia, and when we were together, we were talking about what it was like when we were young. And back to the perception of, we look at things a certain way. Interestingly, her life as a young child, and she refers not just to herself, but many of the people around in her area of the USSR, had considerably more variance and a better experience of life. They were going on holiday twice a year, on plane to a foreign land. They were eating a whole range of food that I wouldn't even have had access to, even if we had money in the United Kingdom, because those things didn't exist in the UK. But they had access to that. They had lots of nice, colourful clothes. They had wonderful dresses. They had experiences beyond what we were doing. And we were told, yeah, you've got the better life than those people. They live behind that iron curtain, and it's dreadful there. But again, way back, and I think it was Michaela said about maybe in the olden days, it was, the news was just the same as the news now. It's potentially telling us one thing, but really something else is happening on the other side of the fence, where the grass is always greener, except they're telling us that the grass is not greener. The grass is actually made out of horrible wire wool, or want of something better. Thing is, I got told that USSR was awful. True experience of somebody in the USSR, it was okay. My life was okay compared to many other people's, but really, we just have to think about how much of what we get told is true and real, and how much are we prepared to question, even in the sense of we get told, oh, this guy is the bad guy, this guy is the good guy. Our country is the good guy, that country is the bad guy. This wrestler is the good wrestler, that wrestler is the bad wrestler. Well, that depends on which one you're rooting for and which side you're on, rather than whether the wrestler is a good guy or a bad guy. Really, the wrestlers are not good guys or bad guys. They are just people who are trying to earn money, a bit like the people in control of what we get told on the news or leading countries, because they get benefit from people thinking that their country is being run well. Because if people believe that, then they're prepared to vote them in or pay their taxes for what they think they're getting. When really, there's a lot of change that could happen that would mean many people would benefit. And perhaps people in the Caribbean would like to stay in the Caribbean, where it's nice and warm, instead of freezing cold countries where they wouldn't particularly enjoy it. Or people from, I don't know, Kenya, like where I am now, would potentially have access to things that they don't have access to now. Or people in the UK could have a government that's not obsessed with telling us that the war, or well, one of the wars, is about democracy, when it's not about democracy, it's actually about money.
So is
All
the
about money.
effect of change, because we're back to change here. We are fully in the realm of change and changeability. And is the change that we are able to affect in ourselves influenced by or coerced by other things, as someone might hear in what you're saying, Matt? Or is it actually something that we have inherent as an ability in ourselves to choose to make change from choice, and it's there in spite of being coerced to think in a certain way?
Well, that's just my lifeblood. Like, I fundamentally believe that every single human being gets to live the life fully by their own decisions, right? So yes, you guys have lived in different countries. I've lived in Africa. I've lived in 3 different countries in Africa, with some of the poorest of the poor and some of the wealthiest of the wealthy, and same in the Caribbean, same in the US. We do have that capacity to have joy in our lives, feel the love and security and protection of family and friends and community, regardless of how many zeros are at the end of our numbers in our bank accounts, right? And that is 100% within our ability to influence, so it doesn't take 2 seconds on TikTok or Facebook or any of the social media platforms to see kids in Africa with their rags on, having the best time dancing and just, now they did not have steak and eggs and all of that stuff for breakfast, but they know they're loved and they're protected, and, they struggle for the simplest glass of water. I mean, I'm just literally drinking a glass of water here. They don't have that. But they're not going through life feeling disadvantaged and just beaten up by life, because within them, they have tapped into some source that influences how they're showing up and how they're feeling. So I fundamentally believe, and it's my life mission to ensure people tap into that part of themselves, that irrespective of what's going on the outside, you can still carry your sunshine on the inside, right? And that is what's going to influence the mind and have this attractive mind, irrespective of what's going on the outside. It's not easy. It's not default. I'm not saying it's just you sit through 2 affirmations and voila, there you go. Definitely not. But is it possible? 100%. I will always advocate for that.
I'd love to jump in at this point because I'm sitting here looking at the panel of the four of us and thinking, man, how many countries have we been to between us, and how many places have we lived? And you know, this is not representative. This panel here is not representative of sort of most people that we will end up working with. And I put no judgment on that. I just find it really interesting that Lydia has pulled together some sort of lifelong travelers, some people who have maybe not traveled since they were 6 months old, but which I did, but you know, people have traveled and we've all lived in different places. And so our perspective is different on just what is possible. And I'm going to say that with all that travel, with all those different cultures and different experiences that we've had, it's easier for us to see that actually, yeah, anything's possible. You just need to step out of that story and write another one, redo the narrative. You know, let's look at it from this angle. Let's make some different decisions. And there's your path to getting into a different reality, if you will. And we do have that power because each of us took it. Each of us said, okay, I'm going to go over here now. Now I'm going to experience that. I'm going to go here. When I left, I was living in London working as a tropical diseases nurse. And I left there to go to Bangladesh. And I went to Bangladesh for 6 months and I ended up staying for 3 years. It was a heck of a ride. Like, it was really cool. And I learned so much in Bangladesh. It was wild. But, you know, I didn't know that was going to happen, but I was open to it. And as I was leaving, people were saying, "What, are you crazy? You got no job to come back to. You've just given up your apartment and you're just taking a backpack and that's it." And it was. I had a backpack and I ended up like 3 years. That's cool. But is everybody prepared to do that? And, you know, how can we, as people who have done stuff like this, help others to do their version? Whatever is the big leap. The leap of faith, quite literally. You have to trust that you're going to land okay. You have to trust that it's going to be all right at the other end. And that's something that, you know, with all the propaganda in the news, and it doesn't matter what country you're in, it's all propaganda, then that keeps people in a place of fear and limitation. It keeps people where they are. So, you know, in the US, there's this culture of, if you're not struggling, you're not trying hard enough. Oh, you're having a hard time paying your rent with 2 jobs, get 3. You know, and it's just, no, that's not the way to live. That's the way to line somebody else's pockets. But it's accepted here. And people aren't stepping outside of that. They're not looking at it and saying, you know what, this is a whole load of bull and I don't have to accept it. So for somebody who's a mindset coach, for example, this is the thing. This is the task. This is the big job, is to get people free of that mindset and help them to see that there's different possibilities. But I did find it very interesting that we're all travelers. Coincidence?
I find it very interesting that and don't take this as my position. I'm fundamentally on the fence in terms of this. Now, how many of us, all 3 of us, how many of us, sorry, 4 of us, I'm excluding myself, I should vote on this as well. Show of hands, how many of us think that we need to drink a certain amount of water every day, and therefore the people who haven't got the water to be able to drink are considerably worse off than us? Put up your hand if you think there's a certain amount of water that you should drink. 1. Okay. So the people who don't have water and are still happy, they still don't have water. And personally, I don't drink much water because, as much as everything else is propaganda, like you said just a minute ago, Michaela, water is potentially, I'm not saying that it is, I'm saying a possible version of this is that water, especially in Western world countries where they add fluoride to the water, amongst other various wonderful things that go into it, is making us all ill. And in terms of making us all ill, that makes them more money. because they get money from the pharmaceutical and chemical companies, and therefore that makes them more money. And theoretically, there are bigger problems beside the fluoride in the water, but that came about because of fundamentally nuclear weapons, because the production of aluminium led to fluoride waste that was pumped into the rivers, and then that ended up in humans. And instead of accepting that that was a bad thing and accepting responsibility for it, certain countries said, oh, fluoride, we need to consume some more of that. Oh, and by the way, we need to consume a certain amount of water every day, and therefore everybody should be drinking X amount of water. And those people also provide us with things like the food pyramid, which puts at the very fundamental bottom of it, yeah, you need lots of carbs in your diet because that's really what gives you energy. Carbs are not energy. Carbs are poison, really, especially the sort of carbs that they tell you that you should be eating, like cereal, for example. That leads us to the fact that there's now an epidemic, pandemic, whatever you want to call it, of people with diabetes type 2 who go along to nurses and doctors and get told, yeah, you need to eat carbohydrate, slow burning carbohydrate, slow release carbohydrate, but you need carbohydrate because that's important as a diabetic. And I'm fundamentally at the extreme level of diabetes. I have what's called brittle type 1 diabetes. So I understand that subject a lot better than the majority of people because I live that life considerably worse than other people. Now, we get told that the sugar that we eat goes to fat, which is a store of energy, so that then when we need it, we can use it. But the fat is not energy. Fat is not energy, and sugar is not energy. It's poison. And what our body is doing when it locks it away as fat is putting it in safe storage so that then we never have to see it again. So again, it's another lie. Much like the water, the food, the medicine, everything.
Matt, I got to jump in, man. I got to jump in. It's not good. I put my hand up for the water, and I'm talking clean water. I'm not talking fluoride. And there's a couple of things I got to say here. One, I'm a level 2 certified nutrition coach. 2, I'm a former nurse, so I have a medical background. 3, I'm becoming a wild fit coach, which is all about eating whole food and avoiding the chemicals. So I can go with all of that, sort of more or less. The food companies give us a lot of chemicals that the body doesn't recognize as food. And I wouldn't say that anybody who has access to that is better off than a person who doesn't have access to that. Empty calories aren't wildly helpful. You know, they just, there's nothing that they give us other than more chemicals. So the water, though, my first job when I left school was working in a chemistry lab for a water authority. So I know exactly what's in that stuff. And I was in the UK for that one. So yeah, I know what's in the water and the chemicals that they add to knock out certain chemicals, you know, to combine with it so it doesn't show up on the list anymore. And the World Health Organization has a list as long as your arm in tiny, tiny print of what is allowed in the water. Arsenic is a natural thing and it occurs in water, especially London's water, by the way. So, you know, when I'm saying yes, people need water, they do. It's a fundamental thing. We have to have water. Not the stuff you're talking about. I'm not meaning the chemical concoctions. And I don't drink those chemical concoctions. I drink water. So I maintain, I'm still putting my hand up for that one, but I had to put the caveat in there that I'm not a fan of all the additions. In fact, when I worked for the Water Authority, I used to filter my water, boil it twice, and I still wasn't happy I was drinking it.
Right.
Yeah.
I want to hop in and say, let's get back to the attraction part of this. But
Sorry.
really, I want to bring in the attraction part of this because in spite of the people who have created the nuclear industry and had the side, we have this in nuclear industry, we have this in petroleum and plastics and petroleum. We have this in so many things where there's a side product. But and that it's put on us, yeah, and quote unquote, said that it is a good thing when it is bad. But what we have in that case is someone taking a situation and saying, this is not what I expected. How can I run with this? How can I leverage this? How can I change? How can I respond to this that is beneficial? And it wasn't beneficial for us, but it is a sort of attractive mind in which these people are able to take a situation that is not good and just say, it's not good, it's not bad, it's an opportunity. It's something that I need to do something else with. And it's making me think of things that I haven't thought of before. So that is, and then taking that and turning it into something that's attractive. It may be for themselves, but that's a very attractive mind, I would argue. So I think we've been inadvertently talking, really about the attractive mind all along. I also think that people who don't have access to clean water, and no, they don't, because it's brown and muddy or whatnot, and are getting that from a place where they gather, have the benefit of the place where they gather. And that is what they're focused on, not on the color of the water.
Hmm.
So that's just something I'm going to pop in there. And I want to give Lark an opportunity to speak.
Yeah, no, sure. I'm all about mental fitness and about positive intelligence. And, I'm just hearing you talk about the SAGE perspective, right? Which is one of the 3 core muscles of mental fitness, where things are just what they are. They are facts. I have a glass of water in my hand. It's not a good thing or a bad thing. It's a reality. There's a glass, there's water in it. I'm holding it in my hand, right? So the ability to interpret that in the context of what I'm thinking, feeling, 100%, that is within my control. So I do like the perspective that you just brought. I could sit here and bemoan the fact that, oh my gosh, the glass is too small, or too this, or the water isn't cold enough, or it's too warm. And I could focus on just that, or just be extremely grateful for the fact that I have easy access to this lovely drinking water. And that could truly just be what I focus on and what brings me joy, because I choose that, because I choose to channel my energy in that direction, right? So yeah, I do like, in the broader context, I mean, we're focusing on the water and the red and blue cars, but I think it's great to illustrate the points where, yes, it's what we focus on. 100% we have the ability to live a life of peace and joy by looking. Sometimes we have to look a little harder than others for the gifts and opportunities in any and every situation. So definitely a proponent of that thought.
Hmm. And
Yeah.
Matt, you had something to say. Do you want to hop in on this?
Okay. I'm going to challenge that a little bit, because not I disagree, because I very much agree that, like, happiness and fulfillment are fundamental requirements and necessities to be happy in life. And I also share something with Lydia, in the sense that we both have believed in the power of ourselves to heal ourselves, and have made significant difference, Lydia a lot more so than I have, in terms of our physical, mental health, let's put it that way. And the ability to do that and be satiated by a level of existence beyond where we were before is enough to be grateful for a life that we lead, whether it still has impact on us in some insignificant or significant way. All sounds very vague, but like I don't really want to get into that too much. I just think that I agree fundamentally that it is really important that we are happy. But I also think that on the back end of what we've talked about earlier, is happiness what we're told it is? And sometimes we are okay to settle for what we have available, or is it more a case of we're getting to that point where that change needs to happen, and either that's going to be a change where we just recycle the people at the top and put new people at the top, possibly from a different country, and have them as the people at the top who then determine what we are happy about because that's what we're entitled to? Or are we going to really change and really innovate and really make people happy, rather than just, yeah, you've got this, that's enough, just be happy about that? What's the better side of that? Is it better just to be happy because you're happy because that's what you've got? Or is it better to be happy because you've actually got something that you actually want? Red car, blue car.
Great. Michaela.
I know Michaela is going to add great value. I have so much to respond, so I'm going to concede to you because I've already spoken and jump back in if I still feel so moved. Please go ahead. I know you're going to have a great addition.
Okay, actually, you go ahead because I just lost what I was going to say. So go for it, and I will.
Oh,
pick
sorry
up
about
after.
that.
It's all cool. I'll pick up after.
Yeah, no worries. Okay, Matt, I think when we talk about happiness, I'm not talking about, oh, I got a pair of gold earrings and oh my, no, that's a momentary fleeting emotion that comes and goes. That is definitely, when I speak about happiness and joy and peace and contentment, that is not what I'm talking about, right? And so amid absolute poverty, sitting in a war zone, I don't know, something that's just so unimaginable to most of us in our normal ho-hum, right? Is it possible to still feel a sense of joy and contentment and peace and be happy, right? That's what I'm talking about. Or are you living in a state of just being distraught all the time, being in fear and anxiety and stress amid anything? That's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about connecting fundamentally, right? Finding that place. And so when we have a bigger house or a smaller house or easier access or not, what I'm hearing you say is us being so responsive to the external. And what I'm talking about is that true internal compass, right? That true connecting to the core of what makes us human, of feeling that peace and happiness and joy.
Source.
Regardless of whether we have the gold earrings and the diamond teardrop, like whatever, or we have, one plastic cup that we share.
Now I can jump in.
Please.
Now I got it back. So happiness is a state. It's a choice. And you can be happy in any given moment if you make that choice to be happy. So you can't give anybody happiness. It's an inside job. It's entirely up to them. If you look at how many rich people are utterly miserable because that wasn't the thing that they thought it was, it's not going to give it to them. But there's a difference between happiness and contentment or acceptance of the situation you're in. And you can choose to be happy, but also not content to leave things as they are. So, then you take action because, okay, this is not acceptable to me. I don't like it. I'm not going to deal with this. You can still be happy at the same time because you have that access to yourself, to your source, and you can do that. So, in the US, there's this thing about the pursuit of happiness, and it's just it really has me scratching my head because you don't pursue happiness. You either are or you aren't. You can look at the rain outside and say, this is an amazing thing. We really needed that. This is so cool. And I love the sound of rain on the windows and whatever else. Or you can look and say, man, that's a miserable day. And now I don't want to go out for a walk, and it's a choice, right? You look at it however you want to look at it. So I think the key here is, how do you identify? Who are you? Who do you identify as? Are you someone who sees the good wherever it's possible? Are you someone who chooses to be in a state of happiness? Are you someone who chooses to take action? Are you someone who chooses to be the only person who puts their hand up in a room? That can be really uncomfortable. And in fact, an episode I'm going to do soon is all about cancel culture, because I do not know where that came from, but that is problematic in the extreme. And I'm absolutely going to go there. I did a thing recently on cancel culture on social media, and it was so interesting. People who thought it was a good deal commented publicly and told me that, I was in the wrong. People who agreed with me jumped into my private messages and said, yeah, you're right, we support you. And I was like, well, why don't you put that out there? Oh, no, because you know what? They're afraid of being cancelled. So how are we being controlled by that? That whole, I don't want to say that. What if I get cancelled? What if people decide I'm wrong? Because that speaks to who we are as a species, right? If you get thrown out of the group, if you get othered and isolated, the saber-toothed tiger is going to get you. So, we've become a culture, and I think it's pretty global. Certainly really ripe in the US, but I think it's global, where people are afraid to be individual and to choose their own path, to choose their own things, because the majority are over here, and that's the safer place to be.
And yet
Right,
that's only the visible majority, because those are the only ones who are willing to put their words, because they're accepted out on the public
they're the loud
platform.
ones. They're the loud ones. And so everybody says, oh, they're right, let's go there, whether or not they have the optimal view, shall we say. And this becomes really pernicious.
And not being funny,
and that affects your red or your blue car. Yes, Matt.
Yeah.
The potentially people who are the outspoken ones talking about cancel culture and a number of other things, we only have access to those people based upon social media. And more commonly, it's getting accepted that there are powers greater than the people in charge of the social media platforms that have backdoors into those platforms, and they have substantial resources, potentially bigger computers or more fake accounts than we could imagine. And those are the potentially the accounts that are being used to drive that difficult situation. I'm not saying that that's people's opinion. I don't know everybody's opinion. I know my opinion. Then I'm fairly safe at knowing other people here's opinion, just based on what I've experienced today and the fact that I know that you're real because I know that you've spoken to Lydia before, and I know that Lydia's real because I've spoken to Lydia before. So I know that generally speaking, we're all real here. Maybe me not so much, but I'm mostly real. My view again is that we're told one thing, but is that what everybody really thinks? We get told that we all want war, for example, and maybe this is a bit close to the knuckle, but we get told that we want war because we want democracy and we don't want the bad people from those other countries being in control, because they're not going to give us democracy. They're going to give us something much worse, like the USSR back when I was a kid. But potentially, and I'm not saying that those people are going to give us anything better or that we should trust those people. But what I do believe is that we should have some accessible, safeguarded platform where people can actually show what they believe and verifiably in a protected way without any hate speech, so that then people can know what truth is, what real people's truth is, because real people give their opinions, rather than being told, yeah, this is the opinion that matters because we're the only voices that are saying stuff, and if you disagree with us, then you're going to get cancelled, or we're going to ensue laws and regulations on platforms that say that if you say something that we disagree with, then yeah, you won't be able to say anything more. Or you mentioned the World Health Organization earlier, who potentially want to bring about legislation worldwide that means that if you disagree with the latest pandemic, you potentially have the pandemic, and therefore you should be silenced because potentially you are giving misinformation about the pandemic because you have the pandemic, and therefore you can be carted off and tested for said pandemic without any real legal rights to anything.
So
now,
to rein this in, I'm wondering
sorry.
if we that's all right. I'm wondering what you think about the fact that we could or could not have change or choose what it is, how we want to respond based on support of the things around us, based on the coercion of the things around us, based on the vision of what it is that's real, what it is that's not real. How can we choose? How can we choose from what we don't think is real to what it is that we want, what it is that we choose? How do we get to that contentment? How do we get to that, whatever it is we want to bring into our lives? How do we affect that? And you know, really, like, we have an audience here who a lot of the people in the audience potentially want to know, how do I get to that thing that I want?
So immediately what leapt in mind when you threw that question out is the book Tipping Point. And I'm thinking, was it Malcolm Gladwell? I don't remember who the author is, but he speaks about tipping point, right? Where you're never going to get 100% buy-in for any one concept or movement. But what you do work toward getting is a tipping point. You get enough people to generate enough momentum so that you start to trend and influence things in the direction that you would want them to go. Is it easy? No. But in today's world of social media and internet and connectivity and phones and cell phones and all the rest of it, we're certainly further ahead than way back when Martin Luther King, for example, spoke. I mean, good Lord, they barely had telephones back then or whatever. Like, you know, we are so far from that now to create that tipping point. It's more within reach, I think. It's more something we can potentially see. So to answer your question directly, like, let's all just take a read of like tipping point. Let's see how that sits. But that would be my, you know, we can't throw our hands up in the air. We can't just be fearful of being canceled, right? We do have to stick our necks out. We do have to stand firmly for what we believe in, but we also have to believe that there are others who do support our point of view and who are willing to support us, even if in the shadows initially, before we generate enough of a tipping point. So that would be my contribution to your thought, Lydia.
I'm all about sticking your neck out. It's something that I kind of do periodically and get whatever comes that way, because that, authenticity is a word that's bandied about an awful lot lately. And I don't know that it means what people think it means, right? Like, authenticity is having the gumption to stand up and say actually what you mean and to hold to that. And that's where the cancel culture conversation came in. And it was just, to me, it was interesting. Like, hey, so it's more acceptable to disagree with me, and and the ones who agree with me are being quiet. This is interesting. It got my interest a lot more after that response than it had before, which is why I'm going to be making it a subject. But to answer the question of how do you get that contentment or that change or the thing you're seeking, for me, it's a question of sorting out your identity as who are you? How do you show up in the world? And what does that mean for you? Like, you know, you being the group, anybody listening, right? And show up authentically as that person, regardless of what other people are saying, because they, you know, they say their thing, that's fine. You have to stand and say yours and be it. That's the thing, is be it, because an awful lot of people are yelling, and I don't know that this is actually their words they're yelling. I think they're yelling other people's. But change and happiness and all those things, each one of them is actually a choice. So you get to make a decision, stepping out of the victim mode of throwing your hands up, as Lark just said. You know, don't throw your hands up and say, well, there's nothing I can do and it's all terrible and, you know, I'm going back to bed, because that gets you more of what you've already got. Let's not do that, but let's look at, okay, what's the first thing I'm going to decide and do differently now? And, you know, the simple thing of turning off the news, for example, that wasn't a big deal, but man, was it a good one. It's really good for my mental health to not listen to all that twaddle that they are putting out there. And, you know, an experience to do with the news, I just want to throw this one in there because it kind of came to my mind. When the whole Iraq thing was going on, shall we go into Iraq, shall we not? I had the timing and fortune, if you will, to go from Canada to the UK to the US to Canada, right around the time all those conversations were happening. So I got to hear the Canadian media that was very much against going into Iraq, and they were showing all of the images of why this wasn't necessary and why you don't want to do it. Then I went to the UK, and Tony Blair was talking up a storm, and he's very persuasive as a speaker. Wow, you know, like, this guy's good. And, you know, he was lying through his teeth, absolutely. And the media was supporting him with all their images. And then you come to the US, and there's the sort of stance of, you're with us or you're against us, and grr. And the media supported that. This is the same thing. And I saw 3 different perspectives in one trip, right? One round trip. And it was fascinating to me. And I knew exactly what the outcome was going to be based on the power of the people who were speaking to their country, their constituents. And Tony Blair had it down, man. That guy can speak like anything. And the force and the appeal to emotion in the US was absolutely going to win for the US people, whereas Canadians were trying to be rational and reasonable. And this wasn't a rational and reasonable argument. This was an emotional one. And so they lost. And, you know, the whole Iraq debacle happened. So to me, this is the power of listening and not listening to those who would influence you. If you're not listening to that, news still gets to you, and you can still make your choices.
That's a power that we each have. When you say, how do we show up in the world? Who are we? This doesn't mean your authenticity is just about yourself. It may be just about yourself, but it may be that who you are is a connector, and that you are connecting other people. So really listening and figuring that out. There's not a person in this room who hasn't figured out, at least in part. I'm not saying this couldn't change, this couldn't grow, but in part, who we are and what we're doing and how we're going to make that work, and that we're not alone, even if we were alone within our corporate structure, within our backpacking across as a virtual urchin, and without notwithstanding the fact that there are people in this room who have come from really a background that is very lonely, to having a reality that is very much not lonely, that very much has other people. Is that your authenticity? Is that where you show up? Or is how you show up to be I mean, each of us is individual, and each of us is also part of this global energy. So how do you show up? What do you want? This is extremely intrinsic to the conversation here. Tony Blair, how does Tony Blair show up? How did he show up in that particular situation? We can choose if we want to get our message out, if we want to not have and be influenced by cancel culture, we can choose to go with the word that's being used, is stick our neck out. We can choose to, in fact, make those situations, those conversations public. Will it get canceled? Have a backup. Put it out on another platform. Go out in the middle of the city square and stand on a soapbox. What's your style? We can be Tony Blair if that's what we see.
Well, it's all down to your identity, right? If your identity is that you're an orator and you can influence people, then that's how you show up. And if you're a connector, that's how you show up. Like it's not me, myself, and I. It's like literally how are you presenting at the moment in this current identity? We have more choice over that than I think people realize.
Yeah,
You don't have to be what other people tell you are.
exactly.
So you choose to be how you want to be. Right, Matt?
No, if you're going to ask me, back to Lydia's original question, how do we fundamentally create an option to express what we feel, what we think, what we believe? You kind of know what I do, Lydia. I hope I know. So I'm creating a platform for people to air their view, like I said before, in a validated and verified way, but also in a safe and non-hate speech platform where there is no scope for people to open-endedly berate the other side, but just to have a vote, have a democratic or individual standpoint, and see where that lies with everybody else's standpoint. So take, for instance, war and peace, because I think I mentioned that a little bit earlier. Let's say that we could ask everybody in the world. Not everybody in the world has an opinion. They're entitled not to have an opinion. That's their right. But we're all entitled to have an opinion. And that opinion could either be, I don't care, I want war, or I want peace. And let's say that 97% of people want war and they want to press the button and everybody dies because everybody hates each other because that's what we're all believing, whatever that might be. Now, that's fine. That's people's reasonable expectation. 97% of people want that. Maybe the governments want to listen to that. Maybe the governments don't want to listen to that. Maybe other people want to listen to it and think, yeah, actually, I believe that as well. Or maybe 97% or any variance in between believe that they want peace. I strongly want peace. I think I know at least one person wants peace in this room. But without asking people and giving them a safe place to do that and making it verifiable so that then people are actually accountable but are safe in their accountability. There's nothing out there that does that currently, not without being questioned on a large scale. Even voting, which is supposed to be democratic, you look at the US, let alone numerous other countries where a democratic election happens, and immediately after or during, there's a huge debacle about, oh, yeah, it's not really democratic because of this, that, and the other. And then it goes on for years until the next one, and then there's more debacle. What if there was an actual way to do that, which there is through technology, to be able to actually have a vote and have people's opinion on a particular question concluded. Do you want war or do you want peace? I definitely want peace every day of the week, every minute, for all time. I don't believe in 2023, 2024, we still have war happening. And that war, those wars, all of them come down to money in some way, shape, or form. Don't think people should be sacrificed for that. So that's my opinion. And I'm doing something about it. So, yeah.
Doing something about it is crucial. It's crucial. It's everything.
Yep.
And you are creating, you did not have support, you're creating your own support. And now
Oh, yeah.
you have support. And to put out a response to the topic that came up of cancel culture, you are addressing that, and you are not allowing yourself to be canceled. This is extremely attractive in that you are attracting this. You are creating it. You are co-creating it with what you are attracting. And this is how an attractive mind works.
Mm.
And it'll work if you co-create that you're going to hit every traffic light, and that you don't have any time for anything else because of all these darn traffic lights and all these things that affect you. It wraps right back to the original thing that I think Michaela had said, that whatever it is that you focus on, that is what will expand.
Yep.
So to wrap this up, what's your takeaway for the viewing audience? What would you tell them in going forward with their attractive mind, or making a more attractive mind?
Yeah, for me, simply it would be that it is possible. It is possible. And to just focus on intrinsically what we can make our reality. And without fear of being canceled, just to expand that into there, just step forward authentically, claim what you are and believe, find your path to happiness, and do so without the fear of being canceled. So that was my takeaway, I think, just from all of the exchanges here today.
And to back onto that, the fear of being cancelled, if you don't look for external validation and you don't allow the lack of it to stop you, then, that also speaks to self-belief, which is, yes, I can do this. And as a side tip, I would add, don't have a plan B, because plan B takes your energy away, it takes your focus away, and it's harder to get to plan A if plan B needs feeding. So have a plan A, go for that, make a step towards it every day, more if you can, less if you can't, it doesn't matter, so long as you're heading towards plan A, and you'll get there. That's what I've got from this.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. It's difficult to go on the back of them. I'm just going to say that change is coming, whether we want it to or not. We can only affect change that is beneficial to all of us by working together, and not being about powerful people, but being people power. One of the things that I very strongly believe in is that people are the solution, not the problem. And the people at the top seem to think that people are the problem, not the solution. Everything that I do is geared towards people being solution. And so the thing that I would leave with anybody is that there is hope, there is opportunity, there is change coming, and there is an option for a change that means that we can all benefit instead of just the powerful people, because that doesn't work. It's been happening for millennia, and however long you want to think about, people have been exploited by the people at the top. It's time for that to change. We have the technology, we have the people who want to change it. And as much as the powerful people try to stop that, all that they do is that they open the window to more people who can be the solution. So just believe that you can be the solution. And when there's an opportunity to be that solution, take it and make the solution happen.
Unwavering belief. Unfailingly believing in yourself and in your purpose, your end goal. Focus on that. Make it happen. Thank you so much for this amazing conversation. I appreciate each of you and can't wait until the next conversation. Thanks. Thank you for being here. From our panel of experts, we have a wide range of subjects in which this is a crucial topic. How do we make things happen? So, all in all, we have mindset and we have the intrinsic belief that we have, and we have mental fitness, how we're going to put this forward to our good, how we see what we have instead of see what we haven't. And how do we change things when our situation is unacceptable and see that we have the power to change? Who are we? How do we show up in the world? How do other people show up in the world? And how can we leverage that to get what we want? Because you have to know what you want. Ultimately, what will make you content, excited, and feeling like you want to feel instead of feeling like you don't want to feel. You can choose. So thank you for being here. I appreciate you. If you liked this, please press like. And if you want to continue this channel to growing and bringing more interesting conversations on the path of joy and contentment, and please gently push the subscribe button. You can add anybody that you would like to hear on here into, you can contact me above, and you can also look for the people on this panel down in the show notes. Also, below that, please comment, tell me what you think, tell me what your idea is as far as your mindset. What is your way of showing up in the world? How have you seen this work? And how does this affect your life and your contentment? Appreciate you. We'll see you next week. Ciao.